My brother made my life hell. Then, got my wife pregnant. Now he wants my help after our parents disowned him and left me their $2 million inheritance. My younger brother Ethan has always harbored a deep-seated resentment towards me. If you think it stemmed from jealousy, you'd be wrong. He was the favored child, not me. There was no reason for him to be envious. To give you some context, our mother always indulged Ethan. He was the golden child of our family. My life with my little brother Ethan was never easy. He was always the favorite, the one our mom doted on, not me. So there was no real reason for him to be jealous. To paint a clearer picture, our mom always spoiled Ethan. She cooked his meals, did his laundry, and even asked me to help him with his homework. I was expected to help, just because we were family. But I never got the same treatment. I didn't really mind. I was pretty independent. Maybe it was partly my fault for always doing what he wanted without asking for anything back. He never helped me when I needed it, and he only ever came to me when he wanted something. I was a quiet, introverted kid. I liked studying and keeping to myself. Ethan, on the other hand, was loud and rough, a lot like our dad. I'm also pretty direct and honest. I don't sugarcoat things. I think my mom might have started seeing me in a negative way because of that. This favoritism made Ethan the star of the family, and like I said, I didn't really mind it when we were growing up. But things started to get bad when he started bullying me and making fun of me for being different. He'd tease me about my height and the fact that I wore glasses. He'd sneak into my room, read my diary, and then complain to my mom about what I'd written. When I yelled at him and complained to our parents about him invading my privacy, they'd just laugh it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. He did even worse things, like almost breaking my glasses and putting gross stuff in my food. He even put little rocks in my cereal once, but luckily, I found them before they could hurt my teeth. When I told my mom, she just dismissed it, saying, "This is how brothers bond." Whenever we fought, Ethan would pick on my insecurities to insult me. We went to the same school, so he knew I was being bullied by some other kids. Instead of sticking up for me, he joined the bullies, calling me names like ugly loser or hairy monkey, and encouraging them to hurt me. He said I was just a big failure. Another time, during a fight over something silly that I can't even remember, he told me to kill myself. While I could usually ignore most insults, that one really stung because I was having a tough time with my mental health. I'm doing better now, but it was awful to hear that my own brother wanted me dead. Since Dad was often at work, and Mom didn't seem to care much, she even scolded me once, saying it was my fault for irritating him. Things got worse and worse during high school. There was this shocking incident when Ethan tried to set my hair on fire, and, unbelievably, our mom defended him, saying he was just playing. Seriously, who does that? Thankfully, my dad finally took my side and pointed out how serious it was. He even threatened to call the police on Ethan. That moment was a real turning point for my brother because he'd never faced any consequences for his actions before. He was genuinely shocked, and my dad made it clear that enough was enough and that Ethan needed to start respecting his older brother. Later, Dad came into my room to talk. I never expected his support because he always told Ethan how similar they were, which was true. Dad admitted that he had waited for years, hoping Ethan would grow up, but he was slowly realizing that Ethan was turning into a big bully. Hearing this from my dad was incredibly validating, and I almost started crying. I told him everything Ethan had done to me over the years, and even mentioned the bullying at school. My dad was shocked at how much I had been through. The next day, he talked to the principal to make sure the bullies were warned about serious consequences if they continued. Later that evening, Dad signed me up for mixed martial arts classes at our local gym, telling me I needed to man up and stand up to the bullies in my life. I know a nerdy kid like me trying to learn to fight might have seemed funny, but I was very focused. I managed my time well to balance my studies and daily workouts, and the MMA classes completely changed my life and my body. One day, Ethan was up to his old tricks again. He stole my pocket money, which we got for helping with chores. I had been saving it up for a while. Ethan sneaked into my room and took it. I caught him just as he was about to ride off on his bike with his friends. I demanded he give my money back, but Ethan mocked me, saying all I could do was run to Daddy for help. I don't know what came over me, but I punched him in the face. He was stunned, fell backward, and I grabbed my money from his pocket before throwing him back down. Ethan started crying really loudly, which was kind of comical, but my mom rushed out to help him and find out what happened. When she found out I had fought him, she was surprised and scolded me, saying I should be a better role model for Ethan, who seemed to enjoy seeing me get in trouble. My mother also complained to my dad about my behavior, saying I needed to be controlled. My dad, looking grim, asked both of us to explain what happened. I told him how Ethan had stolen the money I had worked hard for and saved, while Ethan tried to justify it by saying he needed the money for a date, and that as his brother, I should help him. However, Dad told Ethan he was lucky I only punched him for stealing, because anyone else would have called the police. He went on to tell Ethan that he had no right to take other people's things without their permission. Ethan didn't like that and threw a tantrum, probably hoping our mother would side with him, but Dad stayed firm. When Ethan realized he wasn't going to get punished for getting hit, he screamed about how much he hated me and ran back to his room, locking himself in. After that, Ethan started to distance himself from me. He had finally understood that he couldn't bully me anymore, and that even Dad had stopped supporting his antics. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we were equals. Though he couldn't physically hurt me anymore, he started using verbal insults when our parents weren't around. His behavior got worse as he got older, becoming angrier and more short-tempered each year. When I asked him a question, he would ignore me and walk away, muttering insults like nerd or loser under his breath. If he needed to communicate something, he would tell our mother instead of speaking to me directly. When I asked her why Ethan couldn't just talk to me, she would urge me to be more understanding. I couldn't tell if it was just puberty or genuine hatred. Over time, dealing with his comments became unbearable, and I couldn't wait to move out and get away from him. I repeatedly asked my mother to set up a sit-down conversation for us to resolve our issues, but she always refused, saying she didn't want to get involved. When I asked her opinion on why Ethan treated me this way, she would just brush off the question. Eventually, I left for my dream university, having earned a scholarship as a top student. My dad threw a party for me, and even my mom seemed proud. However, Ethan remained aloof and distant, barely acknowledging my achievements. The day I left for university was a mix of excitement for the future and relief to escape the toxic atmosphere at home. The first few months at university were liberating. I made new friends, enjoyed my classes, and started to build a life separate from the oppressive environment of my childhood. The constant fear of Ethan's verbal attacks lifted, giving me a newfound sense of peace. During my second year, I met my wife, Sarah, at a frat party through a friend, and we instantly hit it off. Coming from a religious background, having kids outside of marriage was frowned upon. However, when we discovered she was pregnant in our final year, we decided to get married right after graduation. Our wedding was small but joyful. Our parents were happy for us, and we enjoyed the celebration. At that moment, I believed Sarah was the love of my life. I had always envisioned a monogamous relationship, one woman to come home to and share my life with. Despite other women showing interest over the years, I never pursued anything because I was genuinely happy in my marriage. Sarah was my dream girl, and I never wanted to hurt her. However, I later found out about 2 instances of infidelity in our marriage. One was an on and off affair with her married co-worker that lasted several years, and the other was a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend during a visit to her family. Some might think I was naive, and looking back, I can't completely disagree. Each time we separated for a while, but I chose to forgive my wife. I didn't want to raise our child in a broken home, and believed we could overcome these obstacles. The affair with her co-worker happened when we were young, and I chalked it up to youthful mistakes and poor judgment. For a while, things seemed to get better, although I could never fully trust her again. I did my best to put aside my doubts, knowing that if I chose to forgive, I had to genuinely work toward a fresh start. It had been 4 years since her second betrayal, and I felt confident in my decision to give her another chance. Sarah seemed to have changed, and we were genuinely happy, planning our family's future. However, 3 months ago, my world was shattered once more when she revealed that she had been having a long-term affair and suggested that our son might not be mine. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. A mix of shock, betrayal, and disbelief overwhelmed me. I struggled to understand the enormity of her confession. In a daze, I managed to ask why she had kept such a significant secret and how she could have done something so devastating. Her reaction was cold and indifferent, as if she were detached from the pain she caused. Her vague responses left me with more questions than answers. It was a surreal and painful moment, confronting the shattered trust and uncertainty about my own family. I kept pressing Sarah for the truth because I felt I deserved to know the father of the child I had been raising since birth. Finally, she admitted it was Ethan. My eyes widened in shock as I asked Sarah what she meant. She explained that she and Ethan had become friends when I introduced her to my family, and she stayed with us from Thanksgiving until New Year's. Ethan, usually cold to me, was warm and polite towards her, which made me glad because I didn't want Sarah to feel unwelcome. Sarah wanted to be accepted into my family, so she spent a lot of time with my mom whenever possible. She noticed the rift between Ethan and me and asked me about it. I opened up about our strained relationship and explained that we might never repair it due to his unresolved feelings. Sarah understood, but started including Ethan in our outings, hoping it would help us bond. Whenever we planned to watch a movie, she invited Ethan, and we watched whatever he chose. During this time, Ethan and I exchanged a few words, which was an improvement compared to his usual silent treatment. I remember Sarah and Ethan hanging out and playing video games together, but I never thought much of it. Sarah told me that one day Ethan opened up to her about his struggles in a recent breakup. Feeling vulnerable, he struck up a friendship with her. She mentioned that he would harmlessly flirt with her when I wasn't around, and eventually things escalated beyond her control. The thought of my wife and brother sleeping together made me feel sick. Sarah confessed that she felt guilty afterward and left him, which matched her abrupt decision to go home instead of spending New Year's with me. Although I tried to convince her to stay, she was adamant about leaving. When we met back at college after the holidays, she was her usual cheerful self. So I didn't question anything. 2 weeks later, we found out she was pregnant. Sarah admitted she didn't know if the child was mine or Ethan's, and with no way to prove it, she chose to stay with me, knowing I was the more dependable brother. This was why we got married. My world felt like it was crashing down. The son I loved might not even be mine. I asked Sarah if she had been sleeping with Ethan recently, and she slowly nodded. She revealed that they had always stayed in touch because their chemistry was undeniable. They would sneak off to hotels, lying to me about working overtime. She admitted that half of her business trips were actually romantic getaways with him. I asked why she married me if she wanted my brother, and Sarah said she didn't want to be the one to break off the marriage. She saw me as a wonderful father to our son and decided to stay. In her words, she made a mistake and didn't know when to stop. I told Sarah I was glad she told me the truth, but that I was going to pack up and leave. She started crying, asking for forgiveness and expecting me to yell at her. Instead, I calmly packed my clothes. Sarah insisted that if I loved her, I should fight for her, and that mistakes happen in every marriage. When she realized I wasn't going to do anything, She changed tactics, saying our son would be affected by a divorce and that children shouldn't be raised in broken homes. I reminded her that I might not even be the father, which made her cry more and accuse me of being cruel. It seemed like she believed nothing could make me want to leave the marriage. Perhaps it was partly my fault for letting things slide in the past. While I did love her, it felt more like it stemmed from thinking we had a son together and had been together since college. Sarah kept insisting it wasn't too late to fix things, but I struggled to believe her and had no patience left. Trust was a major issue, and her words felt hollow. Even if I forgave her, I could never forget she slept with my brother. I've always believed in forgiving mistakes because we're all flawed, but this was beyond acceptable limits. I left her crying on the doorstep and checked into a hotel. The next day I went straight to my parents and revealed everything about my wife's affair with Ethan, explaining how they had been secretly sleeping together for years. The shock on their faces was undeniable. True to her nature, my mother initially tried to defend Ethan, insisting that her boy could never do such a thing to his own brother. Determined to expose the truth, I asked my parents to remain silent and let me call Ethan in front of them. I instructed them to stay quiet so I could catch Ethan off guard, making him believe it was a private conversation. When Ethan answered the phone, I confronted him about the affair. At first, he vehemently denied it, refusing to accept any responsibility. However, when I told him that Sarah had admitted to everything, he started blaming her, calling her characterless. He claimed it wasn't his fault if women were attracted to him, and that he was the better-looking brother. I told him firmly that I would expose him to everyone. When Ethan mocked me, saying no one would believe me because he was the golden child, I scoffed at his arrogance and thanked him for confirming the truth. Knowing our parents had heard everything, Ethan went quiet and then spluttered, trying to explain himself and salvage his image. My mother, still in shock, demanded an explanation from Ethan. He stuttered through a feeble attempt to justify his actions, blaming everyone else but himself, and desperately trying to shift the blame onto Sarah. I could see my mother, who had once been protective of her favored son, now felt a mix of disappointment and anger. In that charged moment, I felt a strange sense of vindication. For years, I had endured Ethan's torment. Now the truth was out, and the roles were reversed. It was Ethan who stood exposed, his actions laid bare for everyone to see. As Ethan's words faltered, my father, usually reserved in his expressions, couldn't contain his disappointment. He asked me to pass him the phone and began to speak to Ethan. "Ethan," my father began, his voice laden with disappointment. "What you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother, but a betrayal of this family. You slept with your brother's wife and continued the affair even after they were married. Your actions have severe consequences and have irreversibly shattered the trust we had in you. I raised both of you to value family, loyalty, and decency. What you've shown today defies everything I've tried to teach you." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into Ethan's conscience. "Your disregard for your brother's feelings and the lack of respect for his marriage are unacceptable. You've not only hurt him, but also torn apart the bonds that hold our family together. Your mother and I are partly to blame for what you've become, but we will no longer tolerate this behavior. From today, you're cut off from the college funds I set up for you. You'll have to figure out how to pay your university fees on your own. I will also stop funding your lifestyle. Do you think it makes you more of a man to sleep with married women? Let's see how you manage without my money." Throughout this, I maintained a composed demeanor. Although I initially wanted to scream at Ethan, watching my dad punish him was the ultimate vindication. I had exposed his true nature, and it was clear he had underestimated the consequences. My mother, despite Ethan's persistent protests, continued to try and justify him, but my father swiftly ended the call. shutting down Ethan's attempts to explain away his actions. Afterward, my mom approached me and hugged me. It had been a long time since we shared such a moment, but in that embrace, there was an unspoken understanding and support amid the family turmoil. She apologized for not believing me all this time. My 14-year-old self could never have imagined this moment, being vindicated and embraced by my mother. Following this, my dad helped me find a good lawyer to divorce Sarah. She and her lawyer tried to fight dirty, asking for alimony since I earned more than her, but her affair played heavily in my favor. We also conducted a paternity test, and it was confirmed that Ethan was indeed the father of the child. The news was incredibly painful, even worse than discovering Sarah's infidelity. I was furious that the son I had loved and raised wasn't mine. However, I decided to stay strong. Sarah begged me. Sarah begged me to continue visiting my son, arguing he shouldn't be punished for the situation, but I couldn't bear to see him. He reminded me too much of Ethan, and I hated it. After my divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me as I moved into my own bachelor pad. It felt surreal to live alone since I had married so young and never really had the chance to experience independence. However, my naturally independent nature allowed me to quickly adapt to my new lifestyle, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. 2 weeks ago, my dad called to tell me he was considering changing his will because he didn't want to leave anything to Ethan. My dad is incredibly stubborn, and once he decided to cut Ethan out of his life, he stuck to it. Ethan tried reaching out to our parents and even showed up at their doorstep, begging for forgiveness, but they refused to let him in. Even my mother, who usually gave in to Ethan's tantrums, seemed done with him, though it must have been hardest for her. Ethan never texted me to apologize for what he had done, showing he didn't regret his actions. He was just upset about being cut off from our parents. Dad told me he planned to leave everything to me, ensuring Ethan wouldn't contest it later. He would leave Ethan only $1. My eyes widened in shock, as my dad had worked hard his entire life. Including his assets, retirement fund, and life insurance, the total came to nearly $2 million. The only condition in his will was that if my dad passed away before my mom, she would continue living in their house, even though ownership would transfer to me. I didn't mind this, as I wanted to care for my mom in her final days. Somehow, Ethan found out about this, and unable to reach our parents, called me yesterday, trying to make amends. He explained how he was struggling with college, and that after Sarah discovered the paternity of the child, she had been pestering him for child support. He said he had no money and was looking for part-time jobs but couldn't find anything. He begged me to talk to our family, to start fresh, since he really needed my help. I laughed in his face and told him I was done with him. I reminded him that he should have thought about the consequences before sleeping with my wife and getting her pregnant. Ethan argued that I was being unfair and that Sarah was also to blame, to which I agreed. I reminded him that I had divorced her, making her his responsibility now. He shouldn't be calling me to complain about her or the child, since these were the consequences of his own actions. Ethan started to raise his voice, but I interrupted, reminding him that he was no longer the favored child in the family, but the black sheep who had slept with his own brother's wife. At that moment, Ethan began to cry, telling me how everyone, including our grandparents and relatives, had turned against him. While this was true, it was no longer my concern. I told him we were done, and that he should never call me again since I no longer considered him my brother. Since then, I've replayed the conversation in my mind. Despite my hatred for my brother, I had never heard him cry, at least not since we were kids. I won't lie, it did hurt me a bit to see him so helpless. So, I guess that's where things stood. I was wrestling with whether I should talk to our parents about him, or if I would be a terrible person if I didn't. I need to explain that I am not comfortable raising another man's child. This isn't a stepson situation. I was led to believe Alex was my son, only to later discover he is actually my brother Ethan's son. Naturally, this revelation hurt deeply, and I cried over it for days. The main reason I don't want any contact with Alex is that I no longer want Sarah in my life. If I remain connected to her child, she will find a way to re-enter my life, and I need my space. You may think I'm cruel or selfish, but I can't see him ever again. At least not for a very long time. It's just too painful. And it opens the door for Sarah to weasel her way back in, and I absolutely cannot have that. I need a clean break from my own sanity. Most of you guessed correctly that it was my mother who informed Ethan about my dad changing his will, leading Ethan to call me as a last resort to fix things. I confronted her in front of my dad, and she broke down, saying I had punished Ethan enough and that he had learned his lesson. My dad firmly told my mother that if she believed what Ethan did was forgivable, then he could no longer stay married to her because he could never forgive such a betrayal. This threat silenced my mother. My dad made it clear that if she ever talked with Ethan again, and we found out, she could pack her bags and leave. As I mentioned, my dad is very stubborn. Hopefully, my mother will learn from her mistakes. She's always been so quick to defend Ethan, no matter what he did. It's like she had blinders on when it came to him. I think my dad's ultimatum finally woke her up, though. It's a tough situation, but it's what needed to happen. 5 months later, my relationship with my parents has improved over the past few months. My dad and I go golfing every weekend, and he treats me more like a buddy than a son. Although my mother misses Ethan, she has stayed away from him. The last I heard about Ethan was from my cousin, who said Ethan had been asking everyone for money and eventually had to drop out of college because he couldn't afford the fees. He and Sarah are living together, and he has a part-time job as a mechanic. Apparently, they are raising Alex together, which is a good thing, I guess. I never discuss Ethan with my parents, and they don't bring him up either. For everyone asking, I am doing quite well. I was promoted at my job 2 months ago, so my salary has significantly improved. I haven't been dating anyone, as I feel I still need time and space to heal. I've been going to therapy, so we'll see how that works out. It's helping me process everything that happened. It's a slow process, but I'm making progress. I'm focusing on myself, my career, and rebuilding my life. It's strange to think about how much my life has changed in such a short amount of time. I went from being a married man, thinking I had a son, to being single and childless, with a completely different family dynamic. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, but I'm finally starting to feel like I'm on solid ground again. The inheritance from my dad, while a significant amount of money, is really secondary to the peace of mind I've gained from cutting toxic people out of my life. I still think about Ethan sometimes, and that phone call where he was crying. It's hard to completely erase someone from your life, especially when they're family. But I know I made the right decision. He made his choices, and he has to live with the consequences. And I have to live with mine, which include focusing on my own well-being and moving forward. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel a sense of hope and optimism. I'm learning to be happy on my own, and that's a powerful feeling. I'm stronger than I thought I was, and I'm proud of myself for getting through this.